with you and members of the Commission this morning. Thank you very much. My name is Lisa Murkowski. I am the Senior United States Senator from the state of Alaska. I serve on the Appropriations Committee. I'm a member of the Defense and Military Construction Subcommittees on Appropriations. Back in early February of 2012, Secretary Donnelly, General Schwartz came to Capitol Hill to brief Congress on a significant restructuring of the Air Force. The changes involved a significant restructuring of the mix between the active component and the reserve component, and of great importance to my home state, what we have come to call up north a backdoor BRAC style realignment of Eielson Air Force Base near Fairbanks, Alaska. All of those proposed changes were intended to be carried out during fiscal year 2013. Now, the magnitude of these proposed changes hit us, certainly the Alaska delegation, like a brick. All were formulated behind closed doors. Those involved in the process were required to sign secrecy agreements. Resistance, we were told at that time, was futile. And this was all a done deal, we were told, and nothing that we could do might derail it. Well, fiscal year 2013 has come and gone, nearly come and gone. Little of the restructuring that Secretary Donnelly and General Schwartz had prophesied has occurred. Both of these very fine leaders have since retired. And as a consequence of the controversy created by the February 2012 announcement, and I'm referring here to the substance of the changes, the process by which they were arrived at, and the lack of transparency surrounding the process, the Air Force suffered a loss of credibility in the eyes of Congress and many of its external stakeholders. In response, Congress established this commission with a broader mandate to advise the Congress on how the Air Force should be structured going forward. So this morning, I come before the commission to describe in some detail, and I appreciate the latitude that you are giving me to spend this time with you, but describe in some detail the Air Force's actions with respect to Eielson Air Force Base. Now, I should note that the FY 2013 Defense Appropriations Bill, as it emerged from the Senate Appropriations Committee, prohibited the Air Force from implementing any of the force structure changes revealed in the February 2012 until the Commission had reported. And while this prohibition was not retained in the final bill, I would suggest that it remains fair game for the Commission to comment on the Air Force's proposed actions with respect to Eielson. And I would hope that the Commission would find significant fault with the Air Force's proposal to stage a backdoor BRAC of Eielson. Let me begin by noting that Eielson Air Force Base offers a number of very unique advantages to the Air Force. Most important of all is its geographic advantage. The Alaska Congressional Delegation is very fond of quoting General Billy Mitchell. Back in 1935, and I'm sure you've all heard it, he observed, "I believe that in the future, whoever holds Alaska will hold the world. I think it is the most important strategic place in the world." And you've got the chart up there that demonstrates just exactly that, where you're sitting there in the center of the state of Alaska and being able to truly transit to all parts of the world. Traveling over the pole, it's possible for the Air Force to get anywhere it needs to get in the world quicker from Alaska than any place else on the North American continent. And Alaska sits at the gateway to the Asia-Pacific area of responsibility, which is the top priority of the administration's current national security strategy. Eielson itself, for those of you who have not had an opportunity to visit, is blessed with a 14,500-foot runway, sufficient ramp space for 130 fighter-sized aircraft, 40 heavy airlift aircraft, and 24 million gallons of fuel storage capacity. It has 750 contingency dorm bed spaces for overflow. We have a privatized housing arrangement that was recently approved for Eielson. Morale on the base is high. The slogan that is chanted is "ready to go" at 50 below, and believe me, they mean both ready to go and 50 below. And the PACAF commander frequently remarks that he has no trouble getting anyone to move to Alaska. His problem is getting them to leave, and we hear that all the time. Eielson also enjoys another important geographic advantage. It sits adjacent to the Joint Pacific-Alaska Range Complex, we call it J-Park, which is often referred to as the crown jewel of training ranges. And anyone who has had an opportunity to participate in those exercises up in J-Park will speak to that. It enjoys this distinction not only because of the significant investments made to make the J-Park state-of-the-art when it comes to anti-access training, but also because it currently has no encroachment and no threat of encroachment. And we know how significant that is today. Some 16 allied and partner nations train in 3 to 5 major exercises a year, including important Asia-Pacific allies like Japan, South Korea, and Thailand. And yet, in spite of Eielson's significant advantages, it is an underutilized base. In the 2005 BRAC round, the Air Force proposed to end all active duty flying from Eielson and warm base the facility. The BRAC Commission at that time rejected the recommendation, concluding that it just is not possible for the Air Force to save money by maintaining a warm base in a cold place. At the beginning of the BRAC round, Eielson hosted a squadron of A-10s and combat-coated F-16s, as well as KC-135 Air Guard tankers that are responsible for refueling the North Pacific Brigade. At the end of the BRAC round, the A-10s were gone, the F-16s became the 18th Aggressor Squadron, and the tankers were left untouched. Then in 2012, the Air Force once again proposed to warm base Eielson by moving the 18th Aggressor Squadron to J-Bear down in Elmendorf and leaving the Air Tankers Squadron as the only substantial year-round operation at the base. Now, the result of this proposed downsizing would be the loss of at least 2,740 jobs, mostly active duty, the closure of 2 schools, and an increase in the unemployment rate in the Fairbanks area from 6.2% to 8.9%. There's also a significant intangible that would result from the downsizing, and that's the loss of community support for the Air Force and for operations within J-Park. A significant loss in that it is well known throughout our military that nobody treats our military better than the folks in Alaska. The Air Force's sole rationale for this move is that it could save $227 million over 5 years from downsizing Eielson, largely through the elimination of personnel and consolidating Alaska operations at Elmendorf. Now, whether or not this would be the case remains to be seen, because Elmendorf right now is pretty full. It's hardly underutilized, and given that one still can't maintain a warm base in a cold place, it's speculative at best as to whether or not any utility cost savings could be realized by downsizing Eielson. Now, disappointingly, I came to learn that in a panic to find some cost savings at the end of 2011, the Air Force largely used kind of these back-of-the-envelope calculations to arrive at these cost savings. And it has done little more to objectively validate them since. Nor does it really have a good handle on whether or not there is sufficient room at J-Bear for increased aircraft operations. The Air Force is claiming that there's sufficient housing within the community to accommodate these some 542 relocating airmen and their families. But the local community itself is very, very skeptical. You would think that they would want to welcome it because it would help their economy, but just exactly the opposite. The schools are filled, there is no available housing out in the community. In fact, the mayor of Anchorage has come out in opposition to the Air Force's plan. I have serious concerns with both the process and the substance involved here. And there's 3 points that I want to make. First of all, I don't believe that the Air Force should be permitted to eliminate thousands of jobs and substantially realign a base outside of a BRAC round. And we all know that BRAC rounds aren't entirely popular in Congress, but one must admit that they do provide for an external vetting of service justification in a more transparent environment. The second point I'd like to leave you with is if the Air Force is to undertake a substantial realignment outside of the BRAC process, it should be required to undertake a global enterprise analysis of its need akin to the strategic basing process. I'm led to believe that the decision to realign Eielson originated solely in PACAV, which was told to come up with a specific dollar figure in cuts. And under pressure to cut, the Air Force neither involved its installations and environmental group in the decision, and nor did it follow the strategic basing model in any respect. It's really beyond me that PACAV would be told to cut the equivalent of an entire air base at the same time it was told that it has responsibility for the most important geography in the world, the Asia and the Pacific, going forward. And this has never been explained by Headquarters Air Force, and it's certainly not because I haven't pressed for an explanation on that. And the third point is the proposal must make sense from a strategic and an economic perspective. In other words, the Air Force must do its homework before it puts a proposal out there to the public. And let me say that the Air Force really has set off a panic in interior Alaska through its announcement that Eielson will be downsized. We've seen real estate values just tank. Businesses have deferred new investments. Teachers are uncertain how long they may have their jobs. Existing mortgages, including, probably especially including, those held by our airmen are underwater. And airmen are uncertain whether the Housing Assistance Program will step in and help them in the event that there is a downsizing. Last September, the Air Force offered a revelation. Perhaps the Eielson decision is unwarranted. After all, they say that Eielson is a promising location to site the Oconus F-35s. There may be a need to upgrade the tanker squadron. The Army is interested in siting a UAV mission in interior Alaska, and the U.S., of course, will have additional defense and security needs going forward in a changing Arctic. To its credit, the Air Force agreed to not take any adverse action on Eielson in 2013 and to then spend this year completing a strategic analysis and a reevaluation of the purported cost savings. In my view, that's the right way to go. That's what we should be doing. It's what the Air Force should have done from the beginning. And it does boost the credibility of the Air Force. But bent on snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, the Air Force is also undertaking a parallel NEPA review toward a record of decision supporting the downsizing of Eielson in 2014. So in this difficult budget environment, the Air Force is spending scarce dollars with its contractor, SAIC, to justify why Eielson should be warm-based. And the Air Force has flown uniformed civilian and contractor personnel from around the country. They brought them up to the state for 8 days to focus on this NEPA. Once again, you have to wonder, if the Air Force has so little confidence in its initial decision, which was supported by no strategic analysis and little cost analysis, why then it's spending scarce dollars on an EIS at the same time that it's trying to come to grips with the Eielson proposal from a strategy or a cost point of view? Isn't it common sense that the Air Force should first complete its strategic and cost analysis and then put it before the public, rather than seek the public comment on a NEPA that is lacking in strategic and cost analysis? It seems like we're looking at a situation where the Air Force has confused ready, aim, fire with fire, ready, aim. Lot of conversation going on up in the state, hearings, public comment hearings last week, and we've been referring to the Air Force strategy as kind of the good cop, bad cop on a polite day, and suggesting that the Air Force is speaking out of both sides of its mouth on perhaps an impolite day. But suffice it to say, it is not the way I would expect the greatest Air Force in the world to be doing business. I began my career in electoral politics. I was the state legislator who represented Elmendorf Air Force Base. I have long enjoyed strong and good relations with senior Air Force leaders. I've come to love the airmen that they lead, and I truly want to love my Air Force again. But in order to get there, it must make strides to improve its thoughtfulness, its credibility, its transparency. Asia and the Pacific are an unstable neighborhood. There's no doubt that the Air Force has a crucial mission to fulfill in the years ahead if our air superiority in this region is to be maintained. And in order to get there, the Air Force must figure out its place within our nation's defense strategy and must be able to articulate its strategic role with a clear voice. Cutting strategic bases in strategic places to make an arbitrary number does not leave me with the confidence that the Air Force has found its place or its voice. So perhaps this commission will play a key role in setting that straight. I thank you for the opportunity to share my comments, my observations with members of the commission this morning. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate your taking the time to come in personally and express these views. We certainly have your statement both for the record and the transcript.